Well, Andrew Twiggy Forrest hiring today of the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor Guy Debelle to run his Fortescue Future Fund and to also drive green initiatives including hydrogen production and green steel is a massive coup for Forrest, but it does leave a big hole to be filled at our central bank. Guy Debelle's shock departure as Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank leaves a vacuum in Australia's central bank at a time when a series of interest rate rises is foreshadowed by the markets and now it seems even by the Governor himself.
It is plausible that the cash rate will be increased later this year. I recognise that there is a risk to waiting too long, especially in a world with overlapping supply shocks and higher headline inflation. But there's also a risk in moving too early.
Debelle was seen as the clear successor to Governor Philip Lowe. Only last July, Debelle's term was extended by Treasurer Josh Frydenberg for another 5 years to 2026. Philip Lowe's term as Governor expires in September next year, and until now, Lowe has been expected to stand down at that time and be replaced by Debelle. Guy Debelle's also credited with being a key driver of Australia's monetary policy response to the economic crisis caused by COVID-19 and earlier, the 2008 global financial crisis. That included a program to buy $350 billion worth of government bonds to support the economy after official interest rates were slashed to 0.1%. Today, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said Dr Debelle has provided strong economic leadership and helped steer the RBA board's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But it also comes at a time when the Reserve Bank faces criticism for giving the impression that interest rates would not rise until 2024, only to have inflation rise and now having to back away from those earlier predictions. Guy Debelle's most likely successors will come from within the RBA ranks. There's Lucy Ellis, Assistant Governor Economic, who first started with the RBA 30 years ago. It's from this position that Philip Lowe ascended to Deputy Governor, then Governor of the Reserve Bank. There's also Assistant Governor Financial System, Michelle Bullock, who's also run the Currency and Business Services departments of the RBA. And there's Christopher Kent, who started with the RBA 34 years ago. It's important to note that his role, Assistant Governor Financial Markets, is the same as Debelle's before he became Deputy Governor. But as someone who could replace the Governor Philip Lowe next September, do not discount Treasury Secretary Dr Stephen Kennedy, already a Director of the Reserve Bank. Well, let's bring in here Clifford Bennett, Chief Economist with ACY Securities. And look, Clifford, I know you've had your issues with the policies of the Reserve Bank over a period of time, but, is this going to disrupt potentially the way in which the Reserve Bank manages the movement in interest rates, especially now that they quite clearly got it wrong in the timing of the first interest rate moves upwards?
Well said, Ross. They have got it wrong. They're way behind the curve already, and they're still talking about maybe they'll raise interest rates. And I think people forget that it is a disservice to the community to have too low interest rates. Everyone enjoys it, but creates bad decision-making perhaps throughout the economic environment, and that's not good for Australia in the long term. We should have rates already at 2.5%, but that's a wish list. In terms of what's happened today, that's no doubt a significant loss to the Reserve Bank. It means the next Governor of the Reserve Bank will be someone different to what we all expected. And isn't that wonderful? It's an opportunity. No discredit at all or no dispersion on the other candidates that will now emerge for the role. But I think it's about time we had a Governor of the Reserve Bank appointed from outside of that Reserve Bank career path, because the Reserve Bank is badly in need of revolution. The OECD has suggested an urgent review of the RBA board, an urgent review of the RBA charter. There are problems with the Reserve Bank of Australia that need to be addressed, and they can't be addressed if we keep promoting from within. We have to have a governor promoted or appointed from outside the bank.
OK, so let's go back to the Governor himself. Philip Lowe was appointed for 7 years. That ends in September next year.
Yes.
Now, only last year you had Guy Debelle, his deputy, reappointed for another 5 years. It took him out to 2026. So it seemed natural there was an evolution, and that really, which was unusual here, that Philip Lowe would not have his term extended for another 3 years to take him out to 10 years in total. So that's a part of the succession plan that seemed to be in place. But as I say, what's happened today really throws a significant spanner in the works. And that even has something to do with monetary policy in Australia and the work that Guy Debelle has done during the recession that we've seen from the pandemic.
And also, we should probably mention it's a great gig that Guy Debelle has got for himself at Fortescue, so well done to him, a good move. But I notice he's only given 7 days' notice, so it's a very quick move as well. And I think everything you've just said here is correct. I do think, though, that generally as a community we should seize upon the opportunity to really put pressure on the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, to broaden his mind, because the succession plan that you've just outlined was typical of the Reserve Bank. It's what they've been doing for 20 to 30 years. And this is a central bank that was the only central bank in the world to be raising interest rates in the middle of the GFC. It's a central bank that thought inflation wouldn't be a problem, and it most certainly will be. There is now the cover story of the tragedy in Ukraine, but the Reserve Bank was already behind the curve. I just think it's rather rare that the OECD would sort of single out a major central bank and say there are problems there that need urgent addressing.
It's fair to say, if anything else, because they're bureaucratic, even though they have independence from government, the fact of the matter is the processes have not changed there for a long time. And I mean, it's simple things like it's not a very opaque organisation. They're very closed. They don't really give information out willingly.
And if I'm not mistaken, they did give themselves pay rises a few years back. The Governor of the Reserve Bank being paid about 3 times the Federal Reserve Chairman. So there's been a world unto itself that needs a shake-up. And my fear is that the Peter Principle has played a role at the Reserve Bank, and people have been constantly appointed who are saying yes to their superiors rather than creating a radical divergence, full spectrum of thought and research and ideas and concepts on how best to serve the Australian people.
I'll tell you what, Clifford Bennett, great to have you in the program today. We'll do it again very shortly. May see why Securities, Clifford Bennett there.